Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you. They were in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, and they were staying there again, trying to manage the daily life of the Muslims. And there are many stories about what happened during that time. The Prophet ﷺ once again was always spreading his knowledge and helping the Muslims to be connected to God and to get the right understanding of their religion. Let me just remind you with one story that is important because it has to do with Muaz ibn Jabal. Muaz ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu was the one who was to be sent to Yemen, and he was the most knowledgeable about al-halal wal-haram, as the Prophet ﷺ said. So once the Prophet ﷺ was close to him, and he told him words that are very heavy for us and that we have to remember. أخذ بيدي, he took his hand, وقال يا معاذ والله إني لا أحبك والله لا أحبك وأوصيك يا معاذ لا تدعن في دبر كل صلاة تقول اللهم أعني على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. He said, I swear by God that I love you. I swear by God that I love you. O Mu'adh, I advise you not to forget supplicating after every prayer by saying, O God, help me to remember you, to give thanks to you, and to worship you in the best manner. These words are important, and once again we can go for the great events, but this is a great event. Small, discreet, and it has to do with three things that the Prophet ﷺ taught Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu. The first was saying and telling him that he loves him. La wallahi ya Mu'adh la uhibbak. Ya Mu'adh, I love you. And this is the way the Prophet ﷺ taught the companions. If you love somebody, tell him. And this happened. If you love somebody, you have to tell him. This is what we have every time in our chronicles of Ramadan, in every episode. At the end, don't forget to tell the people you love that you love them. Once a companion was with the Prophet ﷺ, and he told him this one, I love him. Said, did you tell him? So we have to express this because very often in our daily life, among Arabs in Asian countries, but everywhere, by the way, we do not say it enough, just for the people to remember, to feel it, and to get it as an essential teaching. And the second part was always saying something like this, and at the same time teaching him just to say after every single prayer that we are asking Allah, we are asking God to help us to remember Him, to thank Him, and then to worship Him in the best manner. That's something that we have to do after every single prayers. Every single prayer, this is exactly what he taught Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Now we are reaching a situation where the Prophet ﷺ was also dealing with enemies from within and from around the city. And he had some problems with some tribes, and he tried to get alliances. And at what point one of the companions made a mistake with Banu Amir, because he killed two of the people and they had a covenant. So they had to deal with blood money, the debt of blood. So this is what he wanted to do. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't have the means, and he went to Banu Nadir just to try to get some help, because out of their covenant and based on the agreement they had, they should have helped him. And he felt that something was wrong with Banu Nadir, and that they were not ready to help, and more importantly, they were betraying him and dealing with some other tribes from outside. So as he got this information, he left, he went to see them, and he left Abu Bakr and Ali karramallahu wajha there, and he left. And then when they came back, they asked him what happened. He said, okay, these are the people who are now betraying us, and as they are not helping us for the the money, the blood debt, they are breaking the covenant. So he let them know, now you have to leave, and you have to leave from within our community, and you will take your wives and your children, but you will leave all your belongings. So they went to him and said, that's not going to work. Let us leave with our belongings. So after 10 days of siege and discussion, he accepted to let them leave with what their camels could carry of their belongings. So they left. During these 10 days of siege, he cut palm trees in order, in fact, to let them understand that they are not going to be able to resist what was happening. So they betrayed him, and he cut the palm tree. And this is the only time the Prophet ﷺ did this. And in order to win a battle, just to deal with nature. And we have it, it's so important that we have it in the Quran. When it is said in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ما قطعتم من لينة أو تركتموها قائمة على أصولها فبإذن الله وليخزي الفاسقين. Whether you cut down a palm tree or leave it standing on its trunk, it is by God's will. He will surely disgrace the sinners. Here, it's so important that the Prophet ﷺ did this, that the Quran is confirming the fact that this was done with the permission of God. That in this situation, because it was so difficult and the danger was coming from within, and the Banu Nadir were very much betraying the Prophet ﷺ, and this was the only way to win the war in this very specific situation, in this siege, that he had the right to do that. But after this, and this was the very ethics of war in Islam, you can't, whatever the situation at war, you can't cut fruit trees. You cannot deal or attack women or children or people who are old people. This is quite clear. It's an army against an army. You have to respect nature, to respect women, children, and old people. And religious people, by the way. So this is something that was quite clear, and you cannot mutilate the body of a dead enemy, because the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw Hamza being mutilated after Uhud, he wanted to do the same, and he got an inspiration that he should avoid that and respect the dead body even of the enemies. So these are also teachings that are important for us. You cannot just kill innocent people. Whatever they have done to you, you have to respect the ethics of war, the Islamic ethics of war, as it were. Now, there are another story that has to do with a palm tree, with a young Bedouin who went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I have a problem with Lubaba. Abu Lubaba wants to take the palm tree, the only one that I have. He's very rich and he wants to take it from me. So the Prophet ﷺ called Abu Lubaba and told him, what's the matter? And he said, this is mine. This is not his. So it was just for him to use it, and now he has to give it back to me. So the Prophet ﷺ checked and made the investigation, and Abu Lubaba was right. So he said, okay, that's yours. And then he went discreetly to Abu Lubaba and said, okay, that's yours, but please, he's a poor young orphan, just give it to him. He said, no, that's mine. And he was right. So this is a story where justice had to be respected. So Abu Lubaba was right. This was his right, and it was his palm tree. But yet, the Prophet ﷺ wanted him to go beyond that and to understand that beyond justice, there is something which is open your heart. And there was a companion, Thabit ibn Dahdana, who saw the story, said he went to Lubaba and said, okay, you know what, I will give you all my orchard, you take it for you, and then just give me this palm tree. And Lubaba was so happy because this was a great deal. So he gave the palm tree to Thabit, and he took the whole orchard as something which was a deal between him. And Thabit took the palm tree and gave it to the orphan. In this story, you get also a message, which is Inna Allah yamuru bil adl wal ihsan. Allah commands justice and sincerity, which means excellence here. That you go beyond this. You have to understand, yes, you have your right, but don't worship justice. You have to respect justice, you have to implement justice, but in such situation, in certain situation, you need to get a sense that you have to open your heart. It has to do with generosity, it has to do with excellence, that you go beyond your right, and it has to do with forgiveness as well in some situation here. And this is what happened to Lubaba. And Lubaba was a great companion. You know, he was to be in charge of Medina when the Prophet was to leave. So he was not, you know, a secondary role among the companions. No, he was important. And still, you know, he was much more interested in this story with justice than with the whole situation. Do you remember this story when the Prophet ﷺ was with his companions, and one of the companions took a fledgling from a nest, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him to put him back, because this is not the way we have to deal with birds. That's also a story where you can see the Prophet ﷺ, he's changing the world, he's facing enemies, and he cares about what is happening for a fledgling in a nest, and saying, you know what, look, from this situation, the way he's dealing with the companion, when he's telling them God's goodness towards you is superior to that of this bird for its offspring. Meaning that, once again, from this story, he is making a statement which is a teaching. The mercy of God towards you, the generosity, the goodness is more than this bird in its nest. And for us, once again, nature is talking, and it's a way to be always with God. Remember that al-ihsan, excellence, is to worship God as if you were seeing him, because if you don't see him, he sees you. Meaning that he's everywhere, so you have to worship. So what does it mean? That you always try to look for God around you? No, it's to see, to look at his signs, and the signs are a palm tree, a bird, nature, سَبَّحَ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Everything is praising the glory of God. So look around you, and from these signs you are connected, and you get from justice, because you respect nature, to ihsan, because more than respecting, you are connected to the one in the way you have to deal with nature, in the way you have to deal with the species as well. So this is the meaning of al-ihsan, and this is the meaning where we need to get this from the whole stories that we have in the Prophet's ﷺ biography, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, while he was in Medina, and he was, again, after what happened with Banu Nadir, the people of Banu Nadir, they went to the surrounding tribes, and they went to Banu Qurayza. Banu Qurayza was another tribe with which the Prophet ﷺ had an agreement. So what happened is that all this, Banu Nadir and others who were upset with what was happening, Quraysh wanted to take advantage of the last victory in Uhud. So what they started to do is to create alliances around Al-Medina. And at one point, the Prophet ﷺ heard, and this is Abbas, his uncle, who informed him about what was happening. There were many tribes that were coming, and there were more than 10,000 men coming towards Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't know what to do. It was just 1 week before they were to arrive, to reach Medina. So what did he do? He gathered the companions, once again implementing the very notion and the very reality of shura and consultation. And they didn't know what to do. So at one point, Salman al-Farisi, a Persian companion, Salman, who was before that a slave, said, you know what, in my tribe, in my country, we were to dig a moat around the city in order to prevent the horsemen and the enemies to enter. So they didn't know the strategy. This is the first time they had something like this, because for the Arabs it was face to face, or to find a strategy on the battlefield. And then they listened to him and say, okay, we are going to follow your advice and your way and your strategy. And they started doing and digging around the city. Out of this story, there is again a teaching here for us. Remember, in Badr, they decided to go outside. In Uhud, they wanted to stay within the city. And now, in this battle, they had a new strategy. So the Prophet ﷺ was listening to the people, and he got something that was important for all the companions to understand. You have one set of principles. You believe in God, but you have to be creative. You should be able to change your strategies. You have to be able to listen to people. And even if somebody is telling you it's the strategy that is not an Islamic strategy, by the way. It's a strategy coming from foreigners, Persian people. He didn't even know about them. He took this. Coming to this wise statements that we have, this proverb, which is not really a hadith. In fact, it's a weak hadith. Is الحكمة ضالة المسلم فهو أولى بها أينما وجدها. Wisdom is the lost property of the Muslim, of the believers. He is the first, the most worthy of it wherever he finds it. So we have to take, this is the openness of the Prophet ﷺ, relying on the creativity of his people, and not with this one God, one book, no strategy, no dealing with the surrounding realities. And while he was digging with his people, people were hearing him singing songs and reciting poems, dealing with them as if he's one of them in Medina. Meaning here that it's not enough to say, we believe in God. He was also working and sharing something which is the sense of belonging to Medina, to this culture. And this is why we should understand that wherever you live, whatever your situation, faith needs culture. You need to belong to somewhere. You need to be part of a society. You can't just say, I am a believer and whatever happens. No, that's not true. So you have to be committed and having this sense of belonging to your society, with one condition. Your faith should help you not to be blind in your support of your culture. So it should help you to have this sense of belonging to your nation, but not to end up being a nationalist, a blind nationalist, emotionally driven with your country. No, you should belong to your principles and belong to your culture as part of something which is important. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ was in fact dealing with, what was happening in this situation. And then it's during this situation, when they arrive, the people of all the alliances, the confederates, were unable to enter because of the moat around the city. So they were surprised, they were not expecting this. And the Prophet ﷺ was dealing with them and trying. It was very long. It was more than 25 days of siege by all these people around Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ was so upset because sometimes there was so much pressure and they were attacking from different fronts that he was not even able to pray on time. And then in this situation, he tried to be committed and to be disciplined. And it's in this situation that the verse that we all know was revealed. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. There is indeed in the Messenger of God the best example for you, that you have to follow him. it's strange that it's in this situation. So, of course, the message is wider than that. The Prophet is a model every time, everywhere, in all the situations. But the fact that it was revealed in this situation makes it even clearer for us that in time of repression, in time of difficulty, the way he was behaving, the way he was trying to deal with the enemy, but also with his own prayer, with his own commitment to God, was also something which is a model for all of us. So it's an eternal model in a very specific situation that we have to consider to understand in which way he was to deal with his environment. So this was the Prophet ﷺ. So after 25 days, what happened among this coalition and this conference is that it was cold, that they didn't take enough food, they were just having difficulties to stay, and they had to face a very heavy cold wind. So at the end, they were not courageous enough, and they thought it's not going to happen, it's not going to work. And plus, the Prophet ﷺ, what he did is a trick just to divide them. So he had someone coming to him, which was a companion. At that time, he didn't even know that he was to become a companion, Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud. He came to the Prophet ﷺ and he told him, I converted to Islam. I'm a Muslim, but nobody knows. So the Prophet ﷺ used him to go to the enemies and to say something to one tribe and another thing to one tribe. Say, okay, you have to ask them to send you a companion just to show that they trust you. The others says that they are going to ask you to send, and in fact, because they want to betray you, a trick. Before this, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, can I lie just to help you? And he said, war is deceit. So in this situation, because you are struggling with the enemy and we are powerless, do what you have to do to divide them. And they were divided. So what was permitted in a situation of war is to lie and to say and to try to divide the people by a kind of deception. Here is something that we understand. He was so clear about the fact that in Islam you don't lie, that this exception in a situation, in a war strategy, was permitted, and we have to take it as it is as a Muslim. After what happened, and then they left and they went, the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, just after they left, all the people were very happy. He decided that Banu Qurayza, who betrayed him, and they were connected to this confederation, and they were ready for them to deal with the enemies. So he decided, I have to deal with them. But he came back home, rested for a while, and Jibreel alayhi salam told him, Banu Qurayza, you have to deal with them, because Banu Qurayza, they betrayed you and they are dangerous. So he decided to send people to Banu Qurayza to besiege Banu Qurayza. And he told them during this story, and this is also a story that we need to remember because it has many implications for us, when he said, لا يصلينكم أحد منكم إلا في بني قريظة. Left none of you perform the second prayers of the afternoon until you reach Qurayza's territory. So you have to pray there. So some understood, okay, he meant hurry up, and what he and others understood, no, what he meant is that we have to be there when we pray. So while they were on their way, a group started to pray, saying we have to pray on time, and others say, no, the Prophet ﷺ say, pray when you are there. And these are two trends that we have in Islam up to now. The people who go by the literal meaning of the words, if he's saying this, you have to do that. He said, don't pray before reaching there, so we don't pray. Others said, no, it meant hurry up. Now we have to pray because it's the time. They went back to the Prophet ﷺ, and both were accepted by the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the two trends. Ahl al-Hadith, taking literally the word of the text, and others looking at the purpose and the spirit. Ahl al-Ra', Abdullah ibn Mas'ud on one side, Abdullah ibn Umar on the other side. For us today, this is exactly what we are dealing with. So the Prophet ﷺ accepted both interpretations, and we today, we are in conflict with some of our scholars, some of our leaders. Oh, you take this literally, you take this in the spirit. Of course, you cannot just deal with the text in a literal way, but what has to be taken literally should be taken literally, and some other things should be understood as to the purpose of the text, and this is also part of the understanding. So here we have something which is an important teaching for us in the way we read our text, in the way you read our reality around us, because as much as sometimes we read literally the text, some of our brothers and sisters read literally the world around them, and both are wrong. This is where we get to be faithful to the text. To be faithful to Islam means deep faith and active and creative intellectual minds, critical minds, open to the challenges of the time, and this by showing that they respect the text and they respect the context. Don't forget to tell the people you love that you love them. Life is fragile.